Good morning. Today I want to just sit with you and talk and reflect about the last 6 years of this amazing journey, 4 of which some of you have been following me through, which is crazy to me. But first of all, if you're new to the channel or if you're curious about Kundalini awakening, I would say go to my video where I summarize the past 4.5 years of the awakening, because I won't be going back to those initial years here. This will just be part 2. But a brief, tiny summary would be that the first few years are obviously like the craziest, where everything is disheveled and you don't know anything about anything and you're lost and it's wild and there's so many things going on with your body, and then things start to settle. The more you go on your awakening, the less it's like an awakening, it's just the more subtle it is. So it begins like the big bang, and then there is no difference between life and awakening. Sometimes, in comparing myself to other people, I'll be like, oh yeah, God, I'm going through an awakening. No wonder I have such a different lifestyle, or I purge every day, or so there's moments where it like hits you, but it just becomes so blended and ingrained in your life that it's no longer like a news item. And I think that in the beginning of the awakening, things are very general. Like we can kind of come up with a pattern. They have the awakening, then they fall from grace, dark night of the soul, purging this and that, and we can kind of name some things that apply to everyone, and it's so generalized, and it's kind of cool because we can kind of point at something and say, hey, most people, like, these are the symptoms. But what I think happens later on is it just gets like, it goes from general to personal and more personal and more personal and more personal. And I love this idea that the more personal, like the most personal you can get with something also becomes the most general thing. Like we can find humanity and even the most personal stories. But I do feel like at this point talking about it, and if I ever make any future videos about like Kundalini awakening update, it will just be my personal life and the things that I'm struggling with, because that's what this energy has come here to do. It has come here to have me move through my story and find all of the puzzle pieces. And there are still so many memories and puzzle pieces that I haven't even gotten to, even this far in. So that's kind of cool, like to set that like also realistic timeline is like, it takes a lifetime to even understand your one story. But I also think we have the added weight of not just like any trauma that you've experienced here, but ancestrally and past life, and like all of the, it's like I see like all human history, and then when someone has an awakening in this lifetime, it's like, that you're doing all of that work. It's such an intense, deep level of work. And I think it's that whole like responsibility of like healing for humanity. Some things that I notice have changed dramatically in the last year and a half are, well, first of all, life kicked my ass. Now it's like life and events and experiences that are new, and it's all part of it. Like everything is here to help us awaken more stuff. But I think going through the breakup it kicked my ass in thousands of ways that I would have never predicted. And I am 16 months post, and we still struggle. We still can't seem to like get over it. And I hate those words, but I would say that letting go and grieving something such a connection that was so deep, or intimacy, I just been blown away. And it hasn't just been like the grief of this relationship and that's it. It's like the grief of this relationship unlocked this door, and it unlocked that door, and it unlocked that door. So it's like these cataclysmic events are unlocking part of that life history, that story that I was mentioning earlier. My mother wound kicked my ass, and it was kind of fun to see back in that video where I kind of predicted what is the stuff I was going to work on, I got some of it right. So the mother wound ended in a place, I'm still in that place where instead of healing that relationship, it's more like just, again, another thing to grieve. And and I notice like that in my life, I kind of keep recreating prisons for myself. I start things that I think are good, whether relationships or moving in with parents or like, whatever. And it sounds like a good idea. And then I'm in another prison. And so I know the prison lives in me and in my psyche. And I've become more and more aware of it. And I'm at that point where that's going to be dismantled because I can see the whole thing and my pattern throughout my life. But yeah, I am moving to a new location and I'm with my mom again. And that brought up so many feelings of like, can I be financially independent? Can I make this work? And feeling like I just couldn't quite yet. I just want to like shed light too on like the complexity of certain relationships, which is also a theme of this grief, which in my Aries nature, I would like it to be like the relationship and then it ends or it heals and that's it, And life this past year and a half is just showing me how complex relationships are in my life. And I have just an added respect for that and for how long it takes and forgiveness towards myself for not having that like one and done experience that I've kind of craved. And I think it comes along with that feeling of always wanting freedom in my life and realizing that when freedom comes and I'm working towards freedom, it's going to be so much sweeter. But also I've tasted the opposite. I've felt imprisoned and I have felt stuck in hundreds of thousands of ways, whether it's like the phobia, the fear, the, relationships, entanglements, love, you name it, there are only a few categories in my life that feel always forward moving, positive, and not stuck. So I hope that made sense. But that's part of the struggle. Life just really putting in my exterior reality, whereas before it was a lot of internal work. Now it's like they're very even and they're very symbiotic. Obviously, like the outward experiences happen and then that brings all the inner work. But I think before the outer experiences kind of were, non-existent and it was all inner work. And now it's interesting. And I think that part of that like 50-50 is that we're moving into living. And that's my next point. I have lived more this year, I think, than I have in the entire awakening. And I think I would like to maybe make separate videos about some of my experiences like dating and what that looks like and how I disliked so much of it, but also like exploring dating and my sexuality and not really knowing how to navigate that when you're as aware as you are, going out. Like I've been going to like making a bucket list and being like, okay, today I'm gonna go, go to the fair. Next day I'm gonna go to a concert. Next day I'm going to start painting. Next day I'm gonna grow a vegetable. I've always wanted to eat something out of something I've grown. Like there's this inspiration that I think for so long was cut off. It's like, I want to live. I don't think I've felt that energy in so long. And that's why I haven't been as frequent on my YouTube channel, is because, went through massage school. I got my license and that's all very exciting. But I also was living throughout that time. And I think it does add more spice when you go live and then you come back and are able to report. And so I think I'm going to stay with that. But yeah, videos are being downloaded, FYI. So I don't know what the channel is going to look like. I just wanted to insert that. It might look all over the place for a while because I think it kind of reflects how awakenings are. It's not on schedule. It's not on time. Just is. So yeah, like I've suddenly like picked up a paintbrush and got all the supplies. And in my head, I'm like, I always stop myself from doing things because I suck at planning them. I suck at figuring them out. I suck at, that whole process is like anxiety for me, but there's like this new sense of my ability of like, you don't have to learn how to draw to paint, just get some colors. And I just like intuitively pick a color and I will just like put it all over the paper and I get so much out of it. And I mix it with another color and I'm like, wow. And so I would have never done that because I would have said like, you can't paint. That's an example. Also hiking, I'm like, I don't really know where the trails are. I don't know how to park. I don't know how to do this whole thing. Like so many hangups. And instead it's like, just go, or just like research it, just pick a spot and go. So there was a lot of blocks against living throughout this entire time. And there's just like these little dams breaking open and I can kind of see the light and like, oh, here's a way that I can actually do this, you know? I don't think I like put my life on hold when I got into a relationship, but it was like so all consuming, all of the things that we had to deal with and blending families, that I think it was really hard to like, it was just a different phase of my life. So now moving forward, like I never want to lose this, like I see in neon lights, capital letters, living. That is a big theme of year 6. Other things that have really changed or blossomed are connection to God. So a few months ago, I had to make a really hard decision, probably the hardest decision of my life so far, and I couldn't make it. Both filled me with so much fear. I couldn't define the parts in it, and I had a fall on my knees moment, and I just started to pray. And within 12 hours, the decision had been made, and something woke up in me. And ever since then, I will talk to God. And okay, so funny story. I see God in my head because it's like very hard to struggle. Like, what does God mean to me? Because I think of all these like, you know, ideas of how we see our parents and that gets attached to God and like, is he male? Like, it's just, you know, it's just this whole thing of like imagination that I had to work through. And now I just see it as like the tree from Pocahontas. The wise tree. I think this is so funny. So I just sit in front of her because I feel like God is nature, and I talk or I complain more than ever, or I'm grateful, and I will just speak aloud, and then, you know, may I be blessed with, and just like have some prayers, and I make sure that I do that every day. And I'd love to do that as a separate video because I have like a whole thing down on how I navigate it. But realizing that I've been doing this whole awakening on my own from day one, even though I always, you know, I know the universe and I know I had guides that I mean, it was so clear that I was being helped every step of the way, to the point that my mom made a comment one time and she was like, I just like need, like, if I'm around you, I just know I'm going to be lucky because something has your back. Like, you are being led. Like, I just found a new house and it's impossible to find housing in Asheville. Like, things line up in order for this journey to unfold. But I never really felt properly held. Like, something that I had an intimate one-on-one connection with was there. So that's materialized, and that's been really, really beautiful. Another thing is a connection with land, like really feeling, I keep seeing like this spiral in Aborigine land in Australia, and I know that that's calling me. I don't know how I'm ever gonna make it there. I'm going to Ireland this summer, back after all these years, which will be like all these pilgrimages are arising in me, and it takes a lot of planning and financial like figuring out, but I hear the call. But also just the land here, like a lot of people have asked me like, why are you staying here? It's expensive, you know, it's not like the most metropolitan place, but I think the Asheville mountains are calling me here, and they always have. And every time I return, I feel this sense of relief. So I do feel like lands beckon us and they call us, and that connection with nature opens up throughout your awakening, and there's something that we're doing on land and working with the land that is important, and that might not be revealed to you, but it's still happening whether or not you're aware of it. I think part of it too is like the heroine's journey. I think the feminine were the bearers of the land, like, and we treat women, the way we treat nature, and that kind of gives you a good reflection of where we are in our society. So in the heroine's journey, I think it's about personally recovering those feminine gifts, the role of the oracle, and how I will be the catalyst for everyone's awakening in their life. And I'm the mirror for other people, and I need to be connected to the land. And it's like kind of rediscovering that role and owning it. So if you were to ask me, well, Laura, do you still experience symptoms? Do you still experience electricity in your body? I would say no. The most symptoms that I'm now experiencing are full moons. If I watch some sort of Pleiadian transmission, there's 2 people that I watch. And their videos come out like freaking, with one of them like once a year. But when I watch a video that comes out, I will be, electrocuted for like 2 or 3 days. And then the third area, I find it really happening in sessions when I work with people, which is, why I burn out, I think, so easily, because my whole body is like, and I really experience it after, and as a lot of back pain, and like it really takes, something is happening with that transference of energy. But I also think it's a gift, because you were like this light bulb and energy is like rushing through you, and it's kind of like, it's just like, for example, my mom did a regression on me once, and I said the other bodies that I selected did not have enough power, like they didn't have enough health to deal with that amount of electricity coming in, and this body will not degrade as fast. So that was kind of interesting, that like there's something about this body that can better handle electricity, but you're still going to have symptoms surrounding that whenever you're really plugged in. And I think working with other people and working in groups is one of the ways that like the energy is at like the highest voltage, because I think that's like the most healing can happen. So that's really only times I struggle with it. In terms of my health, like I'm getting beefy. Like I saw in that video that I was like dissing exercise and like I can't ever exercise, but I really have gotten into muscle training in a way that I can actually see like the differences in my body. So I think I am at the healthiest I've been throughout this whole awakening, which is great. Mental health, the phobias and the ways of fear thinking, incredibly less. But it's because I also started listening to the fear and understanding that it came with information, and that this idea of like always confronting fear and like jump off the cliff energy was actually plunging me into things that were just like not helping. So I think a lot of that is also better boundaries, and knowing that like if I'm that scared, or if it's that like a struggle on my mental health, like just don't do it. Like don't get yourself involved in that scenario and situation. And so it's kind of like me and my fear are working together in tandem, and I'm listening to it instead of like, this is something to like not listen to, and I don't mean that you listen to like fake stories and your life gets small, because that hasn't happened at all. It's not like avoidant behaviors. It's more, what choice should I make? Okay, the one that terrifies me and I'm like on the floor freaking out, or the one that kind of feels safe and good? Let's do that. And then that opens and blossoms into something amazing. So yeah, better boundaries overall, less fear. My mental health still around full moons, Mercury retrogrades, things like that. I mean, even, this weekend was the full moon. I had a huge thing come up, and it's hard to know where the lines are in terms of mental health and inner work, because as you're working through stuff, it's going to affect you mentally. So I think that those are very connected, and it's hard to separate. I also want to bring up this other idea and concept that I love, and like in case you're thinking, wow, like she's just doing great, like, oh, great update, everything's perfect, I don't resonate with you anymore. I really want to portray like the truest forms, and not just like the highlights, or not like just the worst. But I think things have really come into balance, and with that balance, there's also this duality of like, I'm the best I've ever been, and I'm the worst I've ever been. Like when something is in full healing moment, raw, dancing in the fire of that, I'm at my worst. And so that's something like, can we accept that we can be at our worst and bawling and like something huge is coming up and you're so insecure and you feel so unsafe, and then you're also like thriving in so many ways. Or like I said, like I can have so many things thriving and feel so good, and then also realize that like I'm still in these prisons or still have so much to work out with the relationships in my life or my childhood. So best and worst simultaneously blended. And I think that is just like the biggest symptom. That is the only one that has consistently stayed, is the emotional processing and the journey that just keeps unfolding, and it's all so beautifully timed. I just see this like whole Disney like pathway through a forest, and the path gets like constructed after I find the clue, and then I find the next clue hidden. And so, you know, I really resonate with a lot of mythology, like hero and heroine's journey, and just this labyrinth. And I think the awakening is a labyrinth. It's not, I've said it's like a staircase because each step you're at a higher vantage point, and I still stand by that, but I'd say that looks too neat. It's just a metaphor that looks a little bit too clean. And I rather say that it's like a labyrinth and there's dead ends, but they're never really dead ends. They just feel like dead ends. And then you're going down another area. And then when you get to the center of the labyrinth, you find a piece, you find some gold, you find the fruits of your labor. And then you kind of unwind out of the labyrinth again and then back in. But it's not this path that is clear. It is messy. Other things that I've understood about myself or have really seen in a different lens is it's been hard for me to come to terms with the way I speak, the way I show up, and you know, trauma brain can be really similar to like neurodivergence, like ADHD or autism. And so there was an exploration for me of like, am I autistic? Like, am I on the spectrum? And I had to like check in with some people, and they were like, no, I think it is like, because trauma can have similar effects on the brain. But ultimately, if the effects are the same, then it is about embracing things that make me different. But when I meet people or I get excited, it's like, honestly, like if I could have free reign of how I spoke, it would be like, I would be going like this, and I would be like doing weird things with my hands. And, you know, a large part of it is like, is that the awakening energy that I was feeling for all these years? Or is it that I'm just unmasking throughout this process, and that, you know, when I was a child, I really did that kind of stuff? And is that just really who I am? And yeah, even if it's trauma, it's still like the imprint is here. So kind of coming to terms with it, because I think I denied it, or was like deeply ashamed of how I was different in terms of neurologically from other people. And I think I'm just embracing it more and understanding it more. And I don't really know, I don't want to put a label on it, but I just think like hinting at those words that I mentioned earlier kind of give me an understanding. Like, yeah, this does set you apart, and this is a part of you, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. And then two last things that I'm gonna say, just in case you're really struggling, I wanna let you know that I almost went on medication. When I was talking about that choice that I had to make, it felt like I was in a crisis, and that the only way that I could get through was just to kind of become more normal or become less triggered. I'm not gonna go on medication as of right now, but there was also another excited part that was like, maybe I could do it for a few months and just see how it interacts with the awakening, and like as a scientist. But I almost went on it, and I got the prescription. And just so you know, like, suffering is suffering, and whatever helps you get through this awakening, get through life, is perfectly fine. You know, we've talked about perfectionism here, and throwing that in the garbage. Any idea of perfectionism and awakening or spirituality is absolute illusion. And a lot of us are suffering. So I just want to kind of let you in on that little piece of my life, and that, we're all in this together. And then the last thing I was going to say is that I also came to a deep understanding of the actual trauma of awakening itself, and like the after effects of not only what the awakening was bringing up, but what that experience really did to me. I think anybody, you know, if I just like gave my dad, who's never taken drugs, like mushrooms, that might be really traumatic for him. His perception is so warped so quickly, and he has to become aware of so many things before he's ready, almost, that I wonder if that actually created a lot of you know, the pain and the suffering that I went through was obviously mine from childhood, but I think there were other layers of fear and distrust and unsafety because of the awakening itself. And that had an effect on how I lived my life. And just like PTSD, you know, it takes a few years for those symptoms to develop or to heal. So I really have come to terms with that, and have a lot of grace for anybody who's had a brutal awakening, because that actually can become another trauma that you have to heal from. And it's part of it, and we have to go through it. But like Glennon Doyle says, we can do hard things. I hope you enjoyed my awakening update. And like I said, it's just going to get more personal from here on out, because I'm in a different phase of this. And I'd love to hear your personal understanding shifts, things that have like changed for you, things that have been getting worse or better, because it's hard to even measure what that is. But I'd love to hear about your Kundalini awakenings, spiritual awakenings, same thing. Love you guys so much.